Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Javel. It,
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
yeah, sorry about that. Like, let me have your. I don't have your. I was trying to. I don't have your. Give me a second. I need your cell
My
number, please. Give me a cell number.
423-7695.
423-7695. Thank you so very much.
No problem.
Okay, once again, please, as I say, once again, delete all my emails. Save my cell number, delete all my emails, folks, and I will send you a new link earlier next week, okay?
No problem.
And delete all the links that you've saved for me. I can send you a better one for next week.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Miguel.
All right.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
How is everybody?
So far, good.
So
Can't
far,
complain.
okay, sounds good to me. All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we get into blah, blah, blah for today. First of all, let me see who's present. Chrysaria.
She's trying to restart her laptop. She said she'll be a little late.
Okay, great. Olivia.
Hello.
Hello, Olivia. Olivia, you sound like you're in middle school. What are you doing in this class?
Say it again?
You sounded like you were in middle school.
No. No.
You're not as young as you sound.
Yeah, I'm young.
Okay. Fantastic. Enjoy it. Time passes quickly. Don't take it for
Uh,
granted.
I'm learning that every day.
I know you are. I saw a guy lifting his son in his arms yesterday, and he had these plaits in his hair. And I was thinking, it was just a few minutes ago. I had both of my sons in my arm with plaits in their hair before they went to preschool, and now they're men. Like, what the hell happened? Like I want my babies back,
Yeah.
but you can't get them back.
Nope. We gotta keep going. Keep going. Keep
Absolutely,
going.
absolutely, absolutely. So, welcome aboard. Way to go, Olivia.
Mm.
Okay, Trisha. Sorry, Denisha.
Yeah.
Okay, Denisha. Great. Kendra.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Daniqua. Hmm. Monique. Okay. Dominique.
I'm here.
Okay.
Morning. And so is Doniqua. I'm not sure what's wrong with her mic.
Okay, so she's working on it. Okay. So Dominique Roberts, are you related to Rupert Roberts, the rich guy?
No, sir.
Just teasing.
Actually, I borrowed this name.
Are you boy?
Hello.
I like that. I haven't heard it put quite that way before. But your point is well taken. Hey, okay, great stuff. Shanice. Okay. And Chevelle. Is Chevelle?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. So now we can get on. I think you guys had asked me some questions last time. Let me see if I have any answers for you. Does anybody remember what the questions were?
One of the questions was if you are going to be able to teach the rest of the class sessions.
Okay, yes, yes. That one, I'm still waiting for the jury to see if they'll come back and say yes. So I guess you'll know that and by early next week. Okay. So honey,
Another question was about the formatting of the exam.
yeah, the examination will be mostly short answers and some true false questions. Understand? Mostly short answers and true false questions. So that means basically from that information, you don't have to worry about having to write a long essay for certain questions. You just need to know what stuff mean, what they're all about, how to define them, and so on. So just be familiar with the material and what it really means, and you should be fine. When students have essays to write, they tend to get a little confuddled trying to remember as many important facts and cases um, to put into the essay questions. I'm not saying if you have a short answer question and it requires a case reference, you shouldn't put a case reference in it. You should, because sometimes case references can earn you extra credit, depending on who's grading the paper. Okay? So feel free to go ahead and do that. But the basic format, as I understand it, will be short answer questions and true and false.
So with that being said, are we going to be taking the exam at a location or?
Yes, I think that was the third question. And the answer to that question is, as I understand it, the exam will be in-house. So you'd have to go into the institute to write the exam. It will not be a
Okay.
virtual exam. Okay. Um, in case you're not aware, they do have the facilities in place that you need to be protected under current conditions. So there'll be the proper spacing and all that stuff in the classrooms for you to come in and be comfortable writing your examination. So you don't need to worry about that part of things. Okay. Any
Okay.
other any other questions before we begin? Okay. Which self-assessments did we do last week? Does anybody remember? Did we do the self-assessment for number 8? For unit 8?
Yes, sir.
We did it for
Yes,
unit 8?
sir.
Yes, we
Yes,
completed
sir.
8. So we were supposed to read chapter 9, and we're doing the assessment for 9 today.
9 today. Okay. I can't believe we've done 3 sessions already. Where did the time go? Didn't I just say hello? And here we are in unit 9 already. And time flies. Okay. So we'll do the lecture then, and then we'll do the unit, and then you guys will be free to go off and do what you need to do this Saturday until hopefully we meet again next week. All right. So unit 9 then is all about what? Does anybody know?
The role and responsibilities of the trust administrator.
Yes. The roles and responsibilities of the trust administrator. I believe you know from your own experience that anybody who administrates anything is somebody who's responsible for the day to day. Okay? So in this
Okay.
case, we'll be talking about the trust administrator, who they are, what their jobs are, understanding exactly what they do, what their duties are, and any laws and issues related to trust administration under the administrator. Usually an administrator is somebody or some group that is responsible for running the day-to-day affairs of the trust company. So you might have a professional trustee that has hundreds and thousands of trust accounts that are being managed by a trust administrator, which can be a person, a department, such a group who's responsible for making sure that all the trust work is being done according to requirements of law and trusts. And of course, If there are any problems, the company will then look to the trust administrator to find out what went wrong, what's going right, and so on. So if you're a trust administrator or part of that team, you get an idea straight away of the kind of responsibility depending on the size of the trust that you are dealing with. So we're here then to look at what exactly does this person or group do that we call a trust administrator, and is it important to the whole trust process or not? And are there any legal ramifications if they don't do this job properly, and so on? Okay. So I need somebody who didn't read last week, who did not read last week.
I'll read.
Who said that?
Kendra.
Okay, Kendra, why don't you start for us, the trust administrator? Let's see what's happening there.
Trust administrator. The trust administrator has the overall responsibility to carry out the administration of the trust under the direction and oversight of the trustee. Whilst the discretionary powers of the trustee may not be delegated, the trustee may delegate certain specific tasks to administrators and other agents in relation to the discretion to be made subject to the terms of the trust instrument. The exercise of the discretion by the trustees is normally shared by members of a trust committee for professional trustees whose deliberations are often documented in trustee minutes, which do not become trust property and are not required to be disclosed to the beneficiaries or a court of competent jurisdiction. A trust administrator is required to be highly trained and skilled in performing the administrative tasks of the trust. The trust administrator must also be knowledgeable of the terms of the parties to the trust. Significant reliance is placed on the trust administrator to provide the trust committee with the information needed to deliberate and decide on how, when, and to whom it will exercise its discretion, particularly in relation to any distributions to the beneficiaries of the trust. Excuse me. Additionally, trust administrators should understand and be knowledgeable of the trust laws governing the duties of trustees and the administration of the trust generally. The standard of duty and care are expected of trust administrators is a relatively high one, given their level of expertise and experience and considering their responsibilities in relation to assisting the discharge of the trustee's duty. The trust administrator is encouraged to review the trust instruments and documents to familiarize him on the beneficiaries, the entitlements, the trustee's duties and powers generally, the appointment of agents, trustee investments, and the overall terms governing the trust. The settler's letter of wishes is also important in the review, as it provides practical guidance for the administration of the trust, although not legally binding.
Thank you, Kendra. Whether you believe it or not, all that stuff that you blurted out is a whole bunch of stuff uh, that are so critical to the trustees' work and certainly the responsibilities of the trust administrator. So we can go back to the beginning, so to speak. Let's touch on some important points that Kendra made in her discourse. Bloody legal language that Kendra made. Uh, let's pick out some critical stuff. First of all, at the very beginning, in the first paragraph, she said that the trust administrator has the overall responsibility, meaning at the end of the day, everybody in the trust company reports to the administrator, and the administrator reports to the trust committee and the trustee. That seems to suggest that the trustee is the company itself that has a chairman sitting on the trust committee, and then the committee is made up of a gang of people who make decisions along with the chairman of the trust committee about how the trust should be administered. So the chairman and the trustee committee is kind of like the board of directors in a typical public or private company. And the trust administrator, in case you were wondering, in terms of positioning, is kind of like the CEO of a company. Okay, so like the CEO reports to the board and the board reports to shareholders, in this case, the trust administrator reports to the trust committee, and the trust committee is responsible, of course, to the beneficiaries of the trust. Because in this case, the beneficiaries are like the shareholders of a typical company. So I just kind of drew that correlation so that you can see how things kind of fit in terms of the reporting relationship. So just like a CEO has overall responsibility for the running of the firm, uh, the trust administrator has responsibility for running the trust, reporting only to the trust committee and the chairman. All right, so that is the first and most important. And notice it says for the administration of the trust under the direction and oversight of the trustee. That means the trustee committee, those who have been given the task of reviewing and monitoring the work of the administrator to make sure that the decision-making process is proper and adequate. Notice also, we are told that while the discretionary powers of the trustee may not be delegated, we saw that earlier, the trustee or the committee could delegate certain tasks, all right, to administrators and real estate agents and portfolio managers and so on in relation to the trust and the discretion of how disbursements and other things should be done in terms of the trust instrument. The key here is while the administrator might be in charge of the day-to-day affairs, they're not ultimately responsible for what happens. They make it happen, but not the ones who have the ultimate responsibility. The trustee continues to have the ultimate responsibility. So when things go wrong, the trustee will go to the administrator. The administrator will go to whoever they appointed to do that job. Because you cannot, as a trustee, delegate your responsibility. Only functions. Very important. Okay? So those persons who have children who are doing their own thing and say they've delegated their parenting to their mother and father or their mom, that is not necessarily appropriate. They might babysit occasionally, but the ultimate responsibility for those children lies with whom? Anybody knows? Am I the only genius in the room?
Parents?
They are bloody parents. Let me put it that way. All right? Because sometimes, remember now, who are the trustees of children? Who are the trustees of children? We don't know?
Parents.
Of course. And therefore, since parents are the trustees of children, parents are ultimately responsible to what happens to children, their children, are they not? Absolutely. Same principle. A trustee may appoint an administrator, but he can't pass the responsibility of being a trustee. Like if something goes wrong, you tell the best beneficiaries, please contact the administrator, that's their fault. It's her fault. No, 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 no. Doesn't work that way. The beneficiaries do not want to hear from the administrator. They want to hear for who is ultimately responsible. That's the trustee. So while you keep dropping your children down, we say in the Bahamas, did they Grammy? That's not Grammy's responsibility. She's just being generous and nice and all that stuff. But the ultimate responsibility lies with the trustee of those children. Same principle. All right. Also, in that second paragraph, there's a little discussion about the discretion of the trustees. Okay. And notice a very interesting point is made, and this is the nuts and bolts of things. When we get into these bloody committee meetings and start talking about what shouldn't and shouldn't be done, who in our discretion as a committee of the trustee should, which beneficiary should get how much and why. Remember, a discretionary trust means that the trustee can pay any amount of money according to how they wish to pay it in their discretion, which means that as a result of that, many beneficiaries are not always happy about what they get. And sometimes they fight and argue and sue trustees. And then trustees have to defend their discretionary decision to pay out a certain amount to certain beneficiaries. On top of that, beneficiaries sometimes talk to each other. So they say, like in an examination, when grades come back, somebody says, what you got, what you got, what you got. Beneficiaries do that too. That some of them know each other. And so they would ask the other one. Some of them are even friends or related. How much you got, Susie? I know. I mean, I opened the thing yet. And when they find out, well, one got more than the other one, then all of a sudden the one who got less is going to be unhappy. And sometimes that could lead not only to an argument, but a lawsuit. Okay? So this discretionary decision-making thing that's carried out by committees and the trustee is a very serious time in the life of trustees. It's a very stressful time when they sit down to deliberate and make the minutes about how they will distribute the millions to the beneficiaries each year. Luckily for trustees, they are not required by law to disclose their minutes and how they made their decisions, okay, to anyone, including beneficiaries or even a court of what we call competent jurisdiction, any court that has the right to hear it. Does that mean that the matter cannot eventually end up in court? Of course. Even though legally they're not required to disclose the trustee, a case could be brought that may cause the court to decide that they need to hear the case. And once they hear the case, the court might decide, you know what? Normally we will not allow for the disclosure of these minutes, but in this rare case, it looks like fraud or something malfeasant has happened. So in this case, we will allow it. But other than that, that's it. Okay? And who's on the top of all these things when they're happening? The trust administrator. That's what makes the job so crucial. Okay? Notice in paragraph 3, she said the trust administrator cannot be a Johnny come lately. They cannot be somebody who's not worked in trust before. They cannot be somebody who's not studied what you guys are studying. They need to know this stuff, both technically, meaning academically, and practically. They must be not just trained, but highly trained, meaning experienced and knowledgeable in carrying out these jobs of the trust. Otherwise, they're not going to be successful in getting the job done on behalf of the trustee. Okay? They must be knowledgeable. Also, when the trust committee gets together, the trust administrator needs to be able to provide them with all the relevant information they need or don't even know they need. Because sometimes committees don't know everything they need to know. So they may not request it. But the trust administrator must be in a position to say, you didn't request these, but you need these also because. Okay? Because when the committee sits down under the trustee to exercise its discretion, the more information that is available, the better decisions can be made about discretionary payouts to the beneficiaries of a trust. Okay? If somebody's handicapped, maybe they should get more than the person who is the beneficiary who is not. One beneficiary might be poor and need a little more money than the one who already have their own money. So this trustee money is just gravy for them and so on. Okay? Of course, a lot of beneficiaries who have their own money, they don't care if they have their own money. They still want a lion's share or equal shares. So if they get less and the poor beneficiary gets more, they might still argue because enough is never. You guys hearing what I'm hearing? Hello?
I'm hearing it. I think that someone has their mic off of mute.
Yeah,
So they need to put it back on. I don't know who it is though.
yeah, somebody needs to mute the news about Joe Biden. Oh, somebody, can you mute? I'll be hearing the news.
Mr. Bristol, I think it's yours. Can you mute your mic, please?
Hello, Miss Ambrista, is that you? Okay, there we go. Hmm. Back in the day, I did a training session in Ministry of Tourism, and part of it had to do with the communication process. And it's interesting what happens between when you send the message and when it's received, and the thing in the middle we used to refer to as until the message is sent across. What we were talking about in those days, this of course is expected, but what we were talking about in those days was when persons are talking to each other, how one person could be saying one thing and the other person hearing something else. Did you guys ever play that game like you have a long line and then you send a message, by the time it gets to the other end it's something else?
Yes, so.
Absolutely. Okay, you remember that game?
Yes,
Actually,
I remember that.
yeah, that still happens even today as we do our work. Sometimes you send a message in one form, and by the time it gets back to you, it's a
It's a
whole
whole
different kind,
different.
it's a whole different kind of message, which is one of the reasons why sometimes, depending on how important something is, I will tell people, please don't tell me, or please don't tell somebody to tell me. See? Or please, because here's what happens sometimes. Believe it or not, as you know, they tell somebody to tell me. Instead of telling me, they tell somebody else to tell me. See?
Yep,
Who tells somebody else to tell me? And by the time I get the message, what happens? It's all
it's
messed
all
up.
mixed up.
Absolutely. And then I end up doing the what? Wrong thing. And then what does the person who originally sent it, who do they blame? Me, not the people in between. They said, how the hell you did that? Like, isn't that what you said? And they're like, no. So
Yep.
yes, information and communication is a very deep thing. Okay? All right. So, ladies, if you see your boyfriend or husband talking to a girl, please do not beat him up and shoot the girl. They might just be having a normal conversation. Okay? Like, don't lose it and like hurt somebody because you might be getting the wrong message.
Man, I
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like how girls, women like to talk sometimes, hit you on your shoulder like child and hit him on his
Mhm.
shoulder. Do not assume that they're being intimate. She might just be doing like, boy, I know what you mean, or something like that. So,
Good looking out, Mr. Wilkinson. Good looking out.
yeah, a lot of people got hurt because of miscommunication. All right, on the job and even in day-to-day stuff like that. Absolutely. Okay. So yeah, so this thing about the administrator, all we're saying here is that the administrator needs to be on the pulse of everything, even right down to what the committees are doing and their decision-making process. All right. So the committee cannot be in and out of the process. The committee must always be touching the pulse. Okay? And it doesn't stop there. All right. The administrator must also be knowledgeable about the trust laws in any particular jurisdiction, all the duties of the trustee and the administration of the trust. Generally, that means while you may not have all the details down pat in a particular instance, you generally need to know how this thing works so that you can be dealing with whatever comes up. Okay? Notice the same duty of care and standard of duty that's expected of the trustee is also expected of the trustee's administrator. Has to be high. High level of expertise is required and experience to get this job done clearly as an administrator. Because essentially, the trust administrator is like an agent of the trustee with responsibility for carrying all the duties and responsibilities of the trustee. That's the point. And as a result of that, if you are hired as a trust administrator, and they make very good salaries, by the way, um, So you do get paid relatively well for your work, but you do have a huge responsibility on your shoulder as a trust administrator. And so as a result, you're encouraged to make sure that, like the trustee, you're familiar with the instrument, the documents that you need to know what's going on, who the beneficiaries are, what the entitlements are, the whole nine of duties and powers of the trustee. So even if you see the trustee stepping on the line, you can get them back in line. If you as an administrator is doing something untoward or out of line, either knowingly or unknowingly, you can get back in line because you know what the requirements are. The trust administrators even sometimes responsible for the appointment of agents, persons to act on behalf of the trustee and the trust. Okay, portfolio investment managers, real estate agents, or anybody who goes out to do a job on behalf professionally of the trustee. The administrator's job is to find such people and put them to work. Okay, and also you remember the governing laws of the trust, like in which jurisdiction does the trust get to have its legal cases heard? So a trust in the Bahamas will usually have a governing law of the Bahamas. You don't want a trust in the Bahamas with governing laws in another country. That would be a problem because if something goes wrong, then the courts of that country will make the final decision about the trust in your country. All right, that's what governing laws are all about. So the trust administrator needs to be familiar with this to ensure that there are no crossing hairs. Okay. And last but not least, she said, even the settler's letter of wishes must be known to the administrator because even though it's not legally binding, the trust administrator needs to know what's in there and know what the general feelings of the settler are. It's like when somebody leaves a will and you leave in your will. So the persons who are probating the will, they read the will and you say in your will, um, I would like for my beloved spouse to blah, blah, blah. And then all the family members are gathered and I was like, you ain't got to listen to that. He did about beloveds like that. Do what you want to do. It's kind of like that. The settler has in his letter of wishes what he'd like to do. The trust administrator and the trustee are obligated to consider it. They're not bound by it in law, but it's a nice, ethical, decent thing to do to consider it, especially if it's reasonable. Okay? And so that in itself is a very important function because once the settler dies, then the settler, you can't go back and ask any question. The settler can't give any opinions on the side or any of that stuff about what they wish. You only have their letter saying, I wish that these things would happen after my death. And the trustee will have to exercise through the administrator, will have to exercise the judgment in doing that as effectively and as fairly and as ethically as possible. Okay? Absolutely. So, in practical terms, I'll tell you a little secret. I said to Mrs. Wilkinson one time, I said, when I funk now and leave the like $350.32 that's going to be left in the bank or whatever, I expect that you will make sure as the trustee of the $350.37 that it's divided fairly between you and my children, my babies, the love of my lives. And if you don't divide it properly, the $250.57, this is my letter of wishes now. I'm actually saying, then I shouldn't say burn in hell, but may God do something. How's that? The point I'm making, I know it's crazy. The point I'm making is when you have this responsibility, you have to look at the settler's wishes as the administrator. You have to consider those wishes. You're not bound by law, but if they're reasonable and fair and blah, 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 you're expected to carry them out. That's the fair, correct, and ethical thing to do. The reason why we have things in court and so much dispute from time to time among beneficiaries is because sometimes trustees and administrators decide they're going to do their own thing for many reasons, unfortunately. And so the situation gets pretty nasty in practice sometimes. Okay? As we speak, there's a name for this thing that goes on. It's called contentious trusts. where beneficiaries are constantly bringing action against trust and administrators for, in their opinion, not conducting the trust in their proper discretionary way. So it's just a little information for you guys who go on to do battle in the world of trust. Okay, you're not yapping for me. And Kendra, I need another reader, please. Somebody volunteer.
I can read.
Okay, who said that?
Chevelle.
Okay, Chevelle, let it rip. The trust.
The trust administrators
Yes.
organization. That's where we are. Okay. The trust administrators organization skills are critical to the effective and efficient administration of the trust. The diarizing of recurring and important events, the preparation of trust files, and the use of comprehensive database in relation to the trust are important organizing tools for the proper functioning of the trust. Particular legal and tax opinions, changes in trust legislation, amendments to the trust, and changes to the beneficiary's circumstances must be duly noted and reviewed by the trust administrator in order to provide professional assistance and administrative support to the trustees. Equally important, the trust administrator must know and understand the investment objectives of the trust and the overall objectives of the trust. The trust administrator is instrumental in ensuring the trustees follow these investment objectives and obtain the relevant consents and approvals from any person duly appointed in the trust instrument in order to execute the investment strategy of the fund of the trust. Sorry. The trust administrator is always required to discharge his administrative tasks and responsibilities within the context of the powers granted to the trustees within the trust instrument and terms of the trust generally. Another administrative task of the trust administrator is to obtain and carefully review and analyze the bank and investment statements in relation to the trust assets. The trust administrator may also be required to make inquiries of bankers and investment advisors and investment managers in relation to the asset holdings of the trust, and in some instances inspect trust property to ensure that it is protected and preserved in accordance with the terms of the trust generally of the trust and generally. As the beneficiaries of a trust are required to be properly informed in accordance to the terms of the trust and or trust law, the trust administrator must keep the beneficiaries fully informed of the trust and any changes to the trust, inclusive of providing them with information regarding the trust accounts and the decisions of the trustees that may affect their entitlements or are in response to their requests on a timely basis. The timely exercise of a trustee's discretion in accordance with the terms of the trust instrument is another responsibility of the trust administrator. Any inaction or omission on the part of the trustee in exercising his discretion, as mandated by the trust instrument, may result in liability for breach of trust. The trust administrator must ensure that any relevant consents or notices that are required to be obtained prior to the exercise of a trustee's discretion are obtained in advance of this exercise. This task is important to avoid any liability to the trustees for any losses to the trust, which may have been experienced due to the improper or invalid exercise of the trustee's discretion.
Thank you very much, Chevelle. Uh,
Mhm.
you, your mouthful is even a little bigger than Kendra's, because that's when we thought we'd seen all the duties and responsibility of the administrator in the first instance. Now we have a whole long laundry list of other administrative responsibilities of the trust administrator. I wish I could say that um, any of them were light stuff that you don't really need to be concerned about it, but I can't because they're all critical to the proper functioning And if anything goes wrong, it could lead to all kinds of lawsuits um, that can cost the trustee tons of money and maybe even the trusteeship, which is an even bigger problem. A lot of trustees don't mind paying some money out if they made an error or some such thing, but to lose millions of dollars in future income is never an exciting perspective. Okay, so the trustee and the administrator must always be thinking, not only do we want to pay out any of our revenues that we've earned for this, for being trustee, but we don't want to lose a trust, especially if it's a well-paying one, because we didn't do something right, okay? Or because we upset enough beneficiaries or some other such thing. All right. So as a result, we are told that if the administrator expects to get these things done, they have to be somebody with high organizational skills to keep it all together. That means you're probably working some long hours to keep this thing going. Um, and now that we can do stuff remotely, when you're not at work, you can still work, and probably would be to keep all this stuff happening. Um, you have to be that person who knows how to keep proper notes, dates, diaries, and all that stuff, so you don't lose track of important dates. As an administrator, you have a lot of dates and circumstances to be aware of to quote unquote make sure that certain things are done. Yes, you'll have a team of people, you'll have a team of accountants, trust officers, legal team, maybe an operational team, front office team, all kinds, new business team, existing, all kinds of stuff depending on the size of the trustee. But as the administrator, you have to somehow keep all of these things working and clicking so that you don't have any disgruntled clients. Okay. Your filing system must be second to none. As an administrator, you must make sure that that happens. You're not going to file, but you might have somebody who is filing, or maybe more than one person, because depending on the size of your firm, those files need to be meticulous. Can't just throw them down somewhere and leave them anywhere. They must be properly labeled, tied, and locked. And somebody should have control depending on the size of your operation and sensitivity of your information. It's the administrator's job to make sure all those things are happening. Okay? Legal and tax issues, crucial. Changes in legislations, amendments to the trust, uh, and changes to beneficiaries. Any one of these things that are left out can cause huge problems for the trustee. So the administrator is constantly looking at these things. Remember now, a lot of this work cannot be done by the administrator alone. They have people working under them who are assigned these tasks, but the administrator still have to take responsibility for the results, as does the trustee. Okay, and so that's kind of how it works in practice. That's why we have ads, etc., for trust officers and other people, because they're coming in to help the administrator get these things done. Okay? Notice equally important down the line, I think it's the third paragraph. The administrator must, not may, must know and understand the investment objectives. Okay? Which means that they have to sit down with the trustee and investment managers and find out what's going on. It should be in writing. They should be reviewing them, knowing what the overall objectives are. So when the time comes, they're not caught by surprise by any successes on the investment scale or any huge failures or losses. They need to know what's going on so that they can report and make the necessary adjustments in the process, which might include changing some investment managers and making adjusted portfolios and all that kind of stuff. So even though the administrator is not doing a lot of this stuff personally, their job is a bigger one because they have to make sure that people get it done. And you probably know that making sure that people get work done is oftentimes much more difficult than getting work done yourself. Because I know you know the whole old saying, if you want something done right, what do you have to do?
Do it yourself.
Unfortunately, only problem as an administrator, you don't have the time, energy, or skills to do everything. So you have to rely on the other individuals. It's like you want to get somewhere quickly in a plane, and you get the feeling that the pilot is hanky panking, not getting there quick enough. So you can't just walk and say, "Move, let me fly this bloody aircraft." Doesn't work that way. Okay? So we have to rely, no matter what's happening, on the other people and run them down until they actually get it done. All right. You may even get some enemies trying to get it done, but what can you do? You have to get it done because at the end of the day, it's your problem. Okay. And if they're going to remove somebody, they may not remove the people who need to get it done. They may remove you as the administrator. All right. Something to keep in mind. Another task that was brought to our attention is the trust administrator's ability to obtain and carefully review and analyze the bank and investment statement. Am I competing with the news? Okie dokie. Okay. Has Biden caught COVID yet? No.
I will hope not.
I don't think so.
You don't, you don't, you don't want Biden. You don't want Biden to catch COVID?
Republicans in here, but I would hope not that Biden doesn't have it.
He don't need to get it right now.
No.
That's true.
Try figure out the remedy so we can all get this thing out and just get back to our regular lives.
Yeah, so crooked Biden and his son are the saviors of the world.
Again?
Oh Lord.
What happened to Hunter Biden? What happened to all those things he did?
Man, I ain't going all the way in the back there, man. I was trying to focus on the present. And
Oh, you mean on the Justice Administrator thing?
what crooked things Biden do?
Well, I wouldn't even go as far as Biden. Biden has been around 40 years doing crooked stuff. Let's just go to his son last year and year before that. If you Google it, you'll find some interesting things.
I have a son here. I thought his son died.
No, one son died. We're talking about the one who did all the crooked stuff.
I thought it was only one son. I thought it was
I know.
accident.
That's what I'm telling you. That's the thing, just like the trust administrator. The trust administrator has to know sometimes more than he thinks he knows. Otherwise, he'll be making decisions with the wrong information. See my point?
Yes,
That's
sir.
Why? This
I
is why
know.
we discuss politics. Anyway, what?
Yeah, you're right. It's a big mess. It is a big mess. Trust me on that one. All right. Okay, yeah, let's go back to civilization because that politics thing is totally crazy. Okay. Isn't Biden the guy that supports same-sex marriage?
What?
Isn't he?
Yeah,
Yes, he is.
they're very liberal. So.
Isn't he the guy that supports LGBTQRST, the whole alphabet thing?
The whole alphabet community.
I'm just being the devil's advocate, but I'm sorry. I am a conservative, especially when it comes to that crap. I am going to my grave like my grandpappy. Like I'm going there dead with it. I'm so sorry because that's, to me, that's very deep and crazy stuff. Okay, back to administrator. Oh, by the way, is 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 Joe Biden an administrator?
Joe Biden is administrator?
Yes. In terms of our discussion,
I think so.
yes, he's a trustee at the moment for the United States. And who are the beneficiaries?
These are the people of the country,
The
right?
citizen.
Yeah, the citizens of the United. So I'm just saying, in case you didn't see the connection, there is a connection. And just like in the world of trust, we have ethical, decent trustees, and then we have unethical,
Unethical, like people who
crooked
try,
trustees.
people
Yeah,
try to take the stock and try to sell it for themselves.
among other things.
Yeah.
That's my point. Same as with politicians who have supposed to have the trust of their citizens. You have politicians who are straight and trying to do it right, and then you have politicians who are
dirty.
Crooked, yes. So here we are, the beneficiaries in the middle of a same thing as with a trust. That's really the point I'm making. So the trust administrator has all these things they need to do to know so that they can do their jobs properly. Interestingly enough, knowledge of things don't cause you to do your job properly either. In fact, some people, the better they know about what's going on, the worse they are. Because now they know how to do what? Get around the system. So they have information and knowledge and they use it for what? Crooked reasons rather than straight reasons. Notice your text doesn't talk about crookedness in other than fraud. But when it says unless the trustee is acting fraudulently, what the text means in academic terms is any crooked, nasty, stinking, dirty work that they're doing. How's that?
Ah, okay.
Okay. Did I make that dramatic enough?
Very.
Hey, that's the whole idea. So that anybody's thought thinks about doing anything, they remember. Mother sick, Mr. Wilkinson said that, so I better not do that. That's the whole idea. Okay? Because folks are always looking to like get away with something, and you shouldn't, because you might be the one to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Whether you're a trustee or you have trust responsibility for country, house, home, organization, whatever the trusteeship is. That's my point. All right. The trust administrator must also be required to make inquiries of bankers and investment firms and advisors and managers and all these things about the assets of the trust, obviously. And if the trust administrator goes to any of these people and requests it and they act like they don't want to give it, that's a problem. Anybody who's responsible for disclosing information to the administrator, the trustee, or anybody else, and they look like they don't want to give it, that's a problem. Usually, that's a red flag that we all too often do not act on, depending on what we are hooked up in. But those persons who are responsible for giving information and those responsible for receiving it, it should work that way. So if you have a responsibility as a trust administrator or on your job or wherever it is, and you have to give information and you don't want to give it, chances are you are up to no good, whoever the you are.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Right.
Hi, I have a quick question. Can a
Yeah.
trustee be the investment manager as well?
Yes.
Okay.
In some instances, the trust instrument, see that word again? The trust instrument can make provision in a modern trust to
Mm-hmm.
be an investment manager in a modern trust, like the ones we have in the Bahamas and Caymans and Caribbean and stuff like that. All right. The reason why I say a modern trust, because in the old conventional trust, that would never happen because it would be considered, what do you think?
Conflict?
Absolutely. But in a modern trust, if you could act like there's no conflict and make it work, quote unquote, we have legal provisions for that nowadays. Do you follow?
Okay, I follow.
Absolutely. It's a very important question because many settlers establish trust and they want to run the trust. Remember what we said about running the trust? What does that
Sean?
reference? Yes. And
Mhm.
part of sham is being the investment manager sometime. Okay? Because for some trusts, the only assets they have is an investment portfolio worth $10 million, for example. And so the settler may say, in addition to being the settler, I also wish to be the investment manager. And I also wish to be the investment advisor, which means essentially who's running that trust.
Settler?
Absolutely. Okay? So while it's possible, I'm competing with the news and river. Hello, somebody's news is on. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, that's an excellent question. Right? And now that question goes into the end of that paragraph, same paragraph which says the administrator has to inspect trust property to ensure that it is protected and preserved in accordance with the terms of the trust and generally. Now, you may have just been reading that like just an academic exercise, but I can assure you there's so much more to that simple statement than an academic exercise. You would have heard by now, somewhere early in this course, that the primary responsibility of the trustee is to ensure that assets of the trust are protected and preserved at all costs. If the trustee is not doing that, the trustee is deemed to be in breach of trust, period. All right, that's the first thing. And if the trustee is responsible, by extension, the trust administrator is also responsible. Why? Because they're acting on behalf of the trustee or trustees. Notice, in accordance with the terms of the trust, but not only the trust, and generally. That means even if the terms are not in the trust instrument and you act in bad faith when it comes to protecting and preserving the trust assets, dog eat your lunch as administrator and trustee. You will find yourself in trouble somewhere, eventually. Okay? Simple sentence, big deal. Okay? None of this stuff in terms of the duties and responsibilities can or ought to be taken lightly. As you can see, it's a long laundry list and they're all critical. Okay? So we drop to the next paragraph and think, oh, it's just casual reading. No such thing. And as the beneficiary of the trust are required to be properly informed in accordance with the trust terms and trust law, the administrator must, not may, must keep the beneficiary somewhat informed. Does it say somewhat? Does it say somewhat?
No,
No, it doesn't. If I raise a true and false question and put somewhat, would it be true?
it would be false.
What should it be?
Must keep.
Uh,
It's in the third or fourth paragraph, first sentence.
properly in what?
Worse than that. Not properly, third line down. Starts with F.
Fully informed.
Fully, fully,
Yeah.
fully, fully. Sometimes people see fully, but they don't see fully. They think they see fully and they think, oh, that means partially. They see fully and they think, as I see fit. They think, see fully and think, however I feel like, and do all kinds of weird stuff. Like fully isn't there. Okay? It's like if you tell somebody something important, say, did you hear me? What do they say? They don't say yes or no. They say, I hear you. And then you say yes or no. They say, I hear you. Is that a yes or no, folks? Is I hear you a yes or a no?
Yeah.
Yeah, for some people. But some people say they hear you because they don't want to commit to yes or no.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's good fun that, yeah. I
I know most of us construe it as yes until something goes wrong and then they say I didn't say yes. I said I heard you. Okay? Especially like friends and family and spouses and stuff. Like when they're in a disagreement, they don't want to answer direct questions and say I hear you. Or don't answer at all. So that you can't say they answered at all. So you don't even have an answer, so you're stuck. So if you're a trust administrator, you say something and somebody don't answer, you have a problem, correct?
So,
Or if you say, John, you're the investment advisor, I need a yes or no answer. Did you do it? And he say, I hear you. Is that yes or no?
sound like John need to get fired.
Well, of course, if he tells me, hear me, I said, okay, I hear you too. Now hear this. You're fired.
Mm-hmm. Shall say that.
Absolutely. So fully means fully. That's really what I'm getting to. Don't read anything into it. It's pretty clear. If you're not clear for some reason, go to the courts. You follow? But
So,
according to the requirement, it says fully informed of the trust and any changes anything regarding the trust accounts, trust assets, anything that happens, fully. All right. Notice the trustee in the next paragraph does not get to exercise his discretion when he feels like it, neither does the trust administrator. Okay? The trustee and his administrator must exercise discretion in a timely manner. So if you have to pay out at a certain time to the beneficiary, if you don't like that beneficiary, you cannot make them suffer by saying, I'll pay them when I feel like it. I know they're waiting for the money and I hope they suffer while they wait. You cannot and should not do that. That's wrong. And if a beneficiary sees that happening, they might take it to court and tell the judge, this is the third time in a row. This guy paid me 6 months later, or this trustee, or this trust administrator, all of the above. I don't like it. It's not required. My lawyers advise me that discretionary behavior should be timely. And therefore, I'm asking the court to force this guy to be this administrator or trustee to be timely, or remove them as trustee. How's that? Okay. So the point is, yes, you have the power in your discretion to pay when you feel like it, but it still has to be timely. You can't pay late or anytime you feel like it, because the beneficiaries are not going to tolerate it indefinitely. That's the point. And you don't have to do anything wrong to piss a beneficiary off. You just have to piss a beneficiary off once they decide that they are. And so we have arguments in trust all the time because just because the beneficiary thinks so. Beneficiary doesn't always succeed, but that doesn't mean they won't bring an action against the trustee. And in this case, the administrator. Okay? Absolutely. Notice any inaction or omission on the part of the trustee and by extension the administrator in exercising his or her discretion as mandated by the trust may result in, does anybody know? Let's say that's a question. What is the answer? May result in?
Trust?
Say it again.
Breach of trust?
Yes, breach of trust. Okay, very important thing to know. And then Chevelle said in her final paragraph that the administrator, after all that, you'd think it would be enough. After all that, the administrator must ensure that any relevant consents or notices that are required to the exercise of a trustee's discretion are obtained in advance, not afterwards. In other words, the trustee needs all the information before a decision is made. Don't let the trustee make a decision in his discretion and come puffing afterwards, well, I have the facts now. The decision has been made, it's too late. It has to be done and provided up front. And it has to be provided up front because if a decision is made before the information is provided to the trustee to make the best decision or the administrator, then there could be liability issues again against the trustees for any losses. For example, if the trustee pays out $300,000 to a beneficiary, and then the administrator comes and says, oh, based on the facts of the information, you should have paid out only $100,000. That is a problem. Now the trustee has to go and try and get the rest of the money back from the beneficiary. Aha, somebody gets it. It may not be that easy to do. Okay? By the time you get back to them, what will they say?
And the money gone.
Yeah, that child, that money done gone. I spent that 300,000 the first day you send that to me, whether they spend it or not. That's what they're gonna tell you because they ain't giving nothing back. And if you expect to get that back, you will have to sue that beneficiary. And that could be another long, drawn out exercise. And then you could threaten the beneficiary. If you don't pay it back, when your next payout come next year, I'll take it out of that. Then the beneficiary will sue you back. Wait, you can't sue me for your mistake? If you need to cover your mistake, you can't use my money from next year. You have to use the court to try and recover it. Get the court to rule in your favor. See? So all of a sudden, it gets a little stinky. And then the beneficiary who's fighting, who's overpaid, is the friend of another beneficiary who has a lot of influence. So now they get together and gang the trustee and administrator and say, John, Mr. Administrator and Mr. Trustee, you guys made the mistake. Now I'm a very influential beneficiary. If you continue to push this issue with the overpayment, I suggest you write it off against your own money. Because if you don't do it, you'll be hurting my friend, this other beneficiary, my bestest girl, who's the other beneficiary, my auntie, sister, cousin, second, who's also the other, like that. And it starts to get personal. And if you push this, I'll call for your resignation as a trustee. We'll get together and move you. And that 10 million in trustee fees that you're going to make next year, we'll give it to someone else. So write off that 200, Mr. Trustee, and just don't make that mistake again. Now, we know the correct thing is they should return the money technically. Because if you go to the bank on Monday, any one of you, and you check your account balance and you see 100,000 in it, should you go on a shopping spree? No, because it's not your money. If you didn't deposit it there, you have to say to the bank, this money is sitting on the account and it's not my money. And so the beneficiary received the overpayment, they should have sent it back and said, this is not my payment. Can you tell me why you sent this amount? But a lot of people are not going to do that. Hell no. People are going to, oftentimes, oh yeah, some people are going to call back because that's just how some of us are and report it and all that. But there are other people that say, man, if you messed up, that's your problem. I'm using this money. I'm hiding this money. I'm not giving it back unless they threaten me with imprisonment. In the meantime, I'll put it on account and generate interest and see what happens, or depending on who it is. I'll go to Waikiki and spend it all. Holiday. All right. Very interesting. Okay. I need a final volunteer. Beginning the last paragraph on page 64.
Um,
Since trustees.
okay. All right.
Okay, who said all right?
Olivia.
Okay, Olivia, let it rip.
Okay. Since trustees are required to account for trust property, they are mandated by law to keep financial records and accounts regarding trust property, which may be requested by the beneficiaries at any time. The trustee's duty to account is related to the beneficiary's general right to information regarding the state of the trust and trust property. However, trustees may prohibit the beneficiaries from having access to information, even information that they are allowed to obtain, if in their opinion to grant such access or provide such information would be harmful or detrimental to the trust. Since Section 83 of the Trustee Act 1998 allows beneficiaries to inspect trustees' accounts and other trust documents except trust minutes, the trust administrator must ensure that such documents are properly presented when requested and are organized in appropriate trust files.
Mm.
This action is also important in the event that the trustee is asked to give information on the administration of the trust as may be required by the beneficiaries or the court. The trust administrator must also take special care to ensure the amendments to the instrument are done in accordance with any express powers reserved within the trust instrument to do so or any other method prescribed. The amendment to the trust instrument must be clear and unequivocal,
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
and the trust administrator should ensure that all changes to be made in administration of trust, example, changes in beneficial entitlements, consents, etc., due to the amendments made to the trust instrument are duly noted. The trust administrator should not only protect and preserve trust property through the proposed amendments, but also ensure that the legal protection or protections and remuneration of the trustee are not adversely affected. He must also take care that the proposed amendments are not contrary to existing law, create additional responsibilities, or increase the risk exposure of the trustees without adequate legal protection or increased remuneration. Not only should the trust administrator ensure that the legal formalities to effectuate the amendment are recognized and executed, but he must also take action in carrying out any and all duties that may assist in the efficient functioning and effective administration of the trust subsequent to the amendment.
Indeed. So thank you very much, everyone, for all those mouthfuls. Uh, I think we kind of get the idea by now of just how serious the job of the trust administrator is. After 2 pages and many paragraphs of all kinds of responsibilities of the administrator, we have a third page with all kinds of responsibilities of the administrator once again. And in most cases, they are not duplications. They are it's different kinds of responsibility. Okay, not the least of which is the trustee's duty to account. So that means the trustee, depending on the size, should have accounting department that maybe even be made up of 1 or 5 or 10 or 20 accountants in the accounting department to ensure that the trust accounting is being properly done, the tax returns for clients are being properly reviewed and done and accounted for, and so on. And again, it's the trust administrator's job to make sure that all these relevant people and processes are in place, because the duty to account is a critical one, and it's a fundamental right that beneficiaries have in terms of information. In fact, duty to account is second only to the beneficiaries being able to review the trust document to see what the terms and conditions are. Those two things the trustee, like trust ministers, cannot refuse. And any trustee who seeks to do so will find themselves being sued or brought under pressure by the beneficiaries. Okay? No question about it. Some trustees have tried to get out of the disclosure side of things by keeping financial information, statements, uh, whether it's financial statements or bank statements or any other financial information from beneficiaries or from certain beneficiaries by letting some see it and not others. Word gets out and gets still stinky. Uh, in any event, none of that is required. All beneficiaries entitled to see the trust instrument and the accounting process, period. Okay, and they're required to see it in a reasonable period of time. Okay? The trustee and the administrator cannot prohibit the beneficiaries from getting access to this information. Cannot. They're allowed to see it by law and usually by the instrument as well. And so they have a duty to provide it. Now, what happens if disclosing information might result in a harm or some kind of detriment to the trust? If the trustee thinks that might be the case for whatever reason, the trustee must then take the matter, or it's recommended that the trustee takes the matter to court. If they outright refuse, they can be sued by the beneficiaries. If they think giving the information could be detrimental to the trust, then they should take it to the courts and let the courts make a decision based on their reasons for not wanting to disclose normal required information. Okay? Even the Trustee Act of 1998 in the Bahamas allows beneficiaries to inspect deeds and accounts and documents, anything related to the assets of the trust. And the administrator's job is to make sure that they're properly presented so that when the trustee presents them to the beneficiaries, they are in the proper order and that they are correct, period. Any amendments to the instrument must also be carefully done. If the trustee is taking on more responsibility, the trustee administrator should make sure that provisions are made for the trustee to get more income for the extra responsibilities that they're taking on. If they're taking on greater risk, these must be highlighted somewhere, and proper remuneration must be accounted for by the administrator to make sure that they are paid, the trustees paid appropriately for the existing and additional risks and responsibilities. Okay? Notice the amendment to any amendments to the trust instrument must be clear and unequivocal. There should be no double language, nothing fuzzy like I hear you. If it's yes, the instrument should have yes. If it's no, the instrument should say no, not I am beginning to say yes. And depending on the circumstances, I'm considering whether no is enough. None of that crappy language. The language must be clear so that there's no doubt in anybody's mind as to what it is supposed to be. Okay? If the administrator sees any weird legal mumbo jumbo that is designed to confuse the issue on any amendments or adjustment to the trust instrument, their job is to go to their attorneys and have it put in clear language so that everybody is on the same page. So that even if the matter is to go to the courts don't have to spend a whole bunch of time trying to interpret double language. Oftentimes courts are not happy with that either. And the petitioners who come with double language sometimes piss off the courts as well. Like, my friend, the court has no time for your double language and innuations. Please be clear in your petition or remove yourself from the court. They do that. That's how much they hate that stuff. And all of that is designed to say any adjustments, amendments, changes, or whatever to the very crucial trust instrument should be clear. No gray areas to confuse the issue later on. Because people are always up to, quote unquote, not always, all too often, certain people, trustees, administrators, others, Tingham and Tinghamdam, are all too often up to no good. And so in this instance, the trust administrator who's up to good have to make sure that they do these things to protect their trustee or trustees. Okay? Very important. Interestingly enough, we thought protect and preserve was the big thing. It is the big thing, but it's not the only thing, along with all the other thousands of things we've seen so far. But amendments to the trust, as I said earlier, must not only be clear, but the administrator must ensure that all the necessary legal protections are in place. And we talked about remuneration are in place. And that if anything, the trustee should be better off financially if things are going to be more, not worse off. No amendment should result in the trustee being worse off unless the trustee is taking on less responsibility and so on. And all of these little bits and pieces must be put in place by the administrator, who will be talking to the trustees, lawyers, other people, and all this stuff, trying to make sure that everything is appropriate. Okay? So that at the end of the day, any adjustments, amendments, changes, or whatever does not leave the trustee without adequate legal protection or proper remuneration. That's the point. And we all know money issues are always a big problem. Okay? Money issues. Does anybody know what the number one problem is in the typical marriage? They did a survey. Does anybody know what the number one problem is?
No financial
Money,
problems.
finances.
Finances. It's not adultery?
I think that comes to me. I think that comes after money. I ain't gonna lie. I think it's the money. That's my opinion.
And
Run
your
that question again, please.
say it again?
Repeat that question for me, please.
Which one? Oh, you mean based on the survey?
What's the question you just asked?
Or what's the number one problem in a marriage?
Well, I recently asked her to a pastor the other day. It would have been late last year because I was helping my cousin with her BGCSE.
Wow.
And he said the most number one problem, what he encountered for married couples coming to him for,
Yes.
is that, I don't attack me, ladies, because I'm one of y'all. They
Okay.
said that the women are too aggressive
Yes.
and don't tend to listen, are not willing to submit to certain things.
Yes.
I thought it
Uh,
was
That's
cheating
powerful.
and finance. I know. I thought it was cheating and finances, but
That's what I thought.
he said majority of people that come to him for counseling,
Mhm.
uh,
yes.
they are not. They don't want to. They don't want to lead. They want to take the role on as the man and be more aggressive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. And that probably nowadays might be equal to money or first ahead of money these days. In recent years, before these days, when I say these days, I mean the last 5 to 10 years. The primary issue was money, still is money. But this issue of a relationship between the husband and the wife, where wives are becoming more aggressive because of the new female movement and new benefits that women are quote unquote enjoying in society, even though they always enjoyed the best of everything anyway. Because every time I see people who have two cars, the person driving the old car is always the guy. Uh,
That
whenever divorces come around, the guy always get kicked out of his own house that he paid for 10, 15, 20 years.
Boy.
Uh, it seems that women were always getting the better end anyway. I don't really see, I understand what they mean in terms of equal pay for equal work. I get that, that's fine. And definitely men are not supposed to hit women and all that crazy, stupid stuff that was always wrong from the beginning of time. That's
Yes,
nothing
ma'am.
new. Okay, that has always been wrong. Because we did it and many people got away, and that doesn't make it right. The only problem is, and it's interesting you should say that about the results that came from the pastor, because in the modern age of the female, so to speak, where they've been getting more income and more job advantages and they're working and all this stuff, sometimes they make more money than their male counterparts, or husbands, or boyfriends. And sometimes we tend to think that making the one who makes more money is the one who should tell the other one what to do, however they feel like. The unfortunate truth about that is money has nothing to do with the character of people and how they're made and who they are and how we should respect each other in relationship. If somebody makes $1 million more than you, that does not give them the right to disrespect you.
That's right.
correct.
Same as if a woman tells a guy something really nasty like "I hate your mind," you stink stuff, you ain't never do nothing around, or whatever like that. That could get him really mad, especially if he made huge sacrifices for that family and he might hit her. That's never a reason to hit her. You follow?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
all this kind of stuff. If you see your spouse with or boyfriend or girlfriend with somebody, you cannot beat up the person. No one, neither of them. You can't shoot and stab people and all that crazy stuff because they're gonna die and not come back. That's not the answer. That doesn't make it right. The point is we have to find a middle ground and understand. First of all, like I keep telling folk, and these are things that come up even in trustee issues because people trusteeship is not only an contentious and court issues are not just because of money alone. It's about relationships as well. These same things. Okay? And so we have to be careful. And I keep telling people, God is a strange dude. There's a reason why men have muscles and women don't. Not that God love men more than women, so he give them more muscles. No way. It's stupid. He doesn't make mistakes. He does certain things for a reason. And we have to find out what those things are, respect them, and work it together. Okay? He gave men and women different dispositions. Men cry, but not as easy as women. There's a reason for that. Men nurture, but they nurture differently from women. There's a reason for that. Because God doesn't make mistakes. We just keep egging it up with our own agenda. So we can find a way to find out why he did these things and then respect each other in these areas. So women are emotional, so we have to treat her gently, so to speak. Not always like you can't say, stop it. It's nonsense. Sometimes you have to say that. That's not what I mean. I mean, generally, you're treating her with gentleness. And a woman has to understand men have a ego that goes beyond a female ego. You cannot mess with that ego. Men require respect, just as women require gentleness and calmness and protection and cover. Well, no matter how we put it, that's how he created, and we could do whatever he wants. Boy, look, let me cover you. And he's like, okay, let me nurture. Everybody be acting out of place. That's my point. And so we have to understand how this whole thing was set up and then deal with each other appropriately. And I can assure you, we will have far less conflict. So if she makes $1 million more, doesn't make her the boss, doesn't make him the boss. We just understand each other's roles. Okay? Have you guys ever wondered, for example, if somebody breaks in the house, they shoot the man first? You know why? Because he presents the greatest threat to what they intend to do. Because
Yep.
the man has the strength and the desire to protect and cover and take charge of the situation. That's, I'm not saying women can't protect and take charge of, kung fu and all that. I'm not talking about no TV stuff. I mean the reality of it. So that's why whenever you have a situation like that, they take out the greatest threat first, which is the male, for a reason. Because once they take out the male, they can control the environment, can they not? But as long as he's alive, there's always a chance that what? He will overpower them. Or he will have a more rational approach to what they're attempting to do. And the tone of his voice can be different in the situation, no matter how we look at it. And the reason for that is has nothing to do with us. It's just that God doesn't make mistakes. We just keep trying to egg things up. And so, yes, it's interesting you should say that. And that is becoming a big problem for young, middle aged, and old marriages. People have to understand how to respect each other on both sides of the fence because that is absolutely crucial to ongoing proper relationships. You can't tell your spouse anything you feel like anytime you feel like it and think it's going to be okay. Eh? It will not be okay. You cannot embarrass them in public, especially a male, including a female. But a female can find a way to work that. But men have a big problem with that still.
I'm just spitting facts today.
Absolutely. Don't mess with that. You're setting yourself up for all kinds of unknown issues when you start messing with that. Don't try to mistreat him, especially in a certain way. And then when you call your daddy, say, "Hey, daddy, mommy, how you doing?" Call your friend and you speak to them. Then when you hang out, they'll say, "Boy, shut up and sit down in the fridge." Man, that's not gonna fly because he expects to be treated with the same or more respect. Because at the end of the day, when something happens to you or her, who has to deal with it primarily? The other person, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if that's the case, how the hell we treating the world so sweet? And the person who's fighting with us, husband or wife or whatever, we anything we feel, man. I'm not saying you have moments where you don't let it rip, but they should only be moments. It should not be normal. It's going to wreck your relationship sooner or later, both ways. And so that explanation that was given by the pastor and what he found out there does not surprise me at all. It is an unfortunate truth. And until people can get that and the money issue sorted out, especially that, because sometimes if we can get that sorted out, people can work the money thing. Because a lot of guys, once they have respect and the proper thing going on, they'll even give you their money sometimes, not all the time. Don't demand it. But they would. They say, you take care of stuff because they know they have your trust and your respect. But if you're that kind of thing, you're sweet to everybody and mean to them, that's not going to fly. Even though not all of us complain, deep down, we're not happy with it. And sooner or later, okay, there you go. So, uh, is that a trust issue? Of course it is, because they have those kinds of things have implications. Because remember, who are the trustees in the family? The same people I'm talking about. And if you don't work that thing properly, then the trusteeship issue is going to fail. And what's going to happen to the beneficiaries? They're going to end up.
Suffer.
Absolutely. Just like in this stuff we're studying.
Mm-hmm.
The trustee and administrator fails, beneficiaries suffer, and they take action and make noise and scream and complain and argue, so to speak, in Bahamianese. All right, the same principle applies. Okay, so some food for thought, but it is connected. That's what I was telling you earlier. A lot of this stuff that we're studying, yes, it is for the trust environment in the organization, but trustees are not only in an organization, company. Trustees are individuals, and trustees are in homes, and trustees are all over the place, as are beneficiaries. And this same thing we're talking about what can impact the trusteeship, these kinds of things impact beneficiaries in a professional trustee relationship where the beneficiary says, uh, I'd like to see the information, and trustee writes back like with a nasty tone. John, you're not entitled, and don't ask again. That's just like a spouse saying, shut up, I ain't feel like answering no question. And then their daddy goes and say, no problem, daddy. Anything else? Or their friend or some such thing. And they're very sweet to them. Okay, I know I made that sound dramatic, but it is important. It is something to think about. If you don't believe me, try the suggestion I made. You'll find if you're dealing with the average typical male or female, if those things are happening, things tend to work considerably better the better we do those things. Remember, women want a little attention and affection and time. Men want your respect and that they are the quote unquote the important thing in your life. The worst thing in the world you can do is treat a man with disrespect and make him feel that he is not important. You don't bloody need him. You're setting yourself up for something. And then eventually, even the beneficiaries might suffer, kind of like the same thing. All right. Any questions then on the role of the trust administrator? A whole lot of responsibilities. Don't get me wrong, trust administrators get paid very well. That's why they fight to become administrators. But they have huge responsibilities. Okay, and the more effective they are, the better they're rewarded, and the better their organizations function. Okay, and they make the trustee look good or trustees, and everybody is happy. Of course, the converse of that is true. If they're not doing their jobs well, uh, everybody suffers, and eventually they may end up without that job. Okay? All right, any questions before we go to the self-assessment then? Okay, okay. All right, well, let's go to the self-assessment questions in Unit 9. And let me see what you guys came up with. Okay. Where's that? Number 1, who has overall responsibility for the administration of the trust under the guidance and oversight of the trustee?
Trust administrator.
Yes, the trust administrator, absolutely. Number 2, the exercise of the discretion by the trustees is normally shared by members of a blank for professional trustees whose deliberations are often documented in trustee minutes, which do not become trust property and are not required to be disclosed to the beneficiaries or a court of competent jurisdiction.
Trust committee.
Trust committee.
Yes, the trust committee, by all means. Notice we took the opportunity to remind you about the fact that minutes are not disclosed, and the reason why it keeps coming up is because beneficiaries are always trying to get their hands on trustee minutes to see what steps they took to make their discretionary decisions so they could see who to sue, argue with, and fight with in terms of other beneficiaries, so to speak. All right. But luckily, they are not allowed to be disclosed unless somebody can prove a beneficiary that there's fraud somewhere, and the courts might. The courts might, but not normally. Number 3, the trust administrator must also be blank of the terms and parties to the trust.
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable, yes, yes. Number 4, additionally, trust administrators should understand and be knowledgeable of the blank governing the duties of trustees and the administration of the trust generally.
Trust laws.
Yes, the trust laws. Absolutely. Number 5, the trust administrator is encouraged to blank and to familiarize him on the beneficiaries, their entitlements, the trustee duties and powers generally, the appointment of agents, trustee investments, and the overall terms governing the trust.
Review the trust instrument.
And documents.
Yes, review the trust instruments and documents. Why do you think we say and documents?
Because there might be other stuff outside of what's listed into the trust document.
Absolutely, there might be some stuff outside that need to be added to. Would they like? Are they likely to include trust um, minutes? Might they include trust minutes?
You mean the trust? You mean the document?
Yeah, these documents that you're encouraged to review.
They can review it.
Say it again.
They would be able to as the trust administrators,
Okay, who would not be able to?
the beneficiaries.
Absolutely. So the trust administrator may get to see the minutes. They
And
should
this would
be able to
include the
see.
letter of wishes too, correct?
Absolutely. Now, remember, even though they get to see the letter of wishes, the question of whether they'll see the minutes should not be a contentious one. They should see the minutes. But every now and then, a trustee may not want to disclose the contents of certain minutes even to the administrator. Could that happen, you think? Do you think that could happen potentially?
Yeah, dude.
Of course it could, because trustees are sometimes up to what? No good. And sometimes that includes hiding stuff even from the administrator, of course, by all means. Okay?
So in a situation like that, would the administrator could he demand that they see the minutes?
The administrator could request it.
Mhm.
If they don't get it, for some reason, the administrator, depending on the seriousness of the situation, if they don't think it's serious enough, they might let it go. However, if they think it's serious enough, the administrator could then perhaps speak to the protector of the trust, if there's a protector, to see how the protector would like to proceed. Uh, the administrator could threaten the trustee that if you don't let me see the information, I may have to resign because I'll be functioning quote unquote in the dark. There are some steps that you could take, but any of those steps are ultimately going to lead to what? Discomfort, yeah? Yes?
Mhm.
Which might end up in the dismissal of the administrator before they can get the results that they want. That is an extreme case. That would be unfortunate, but it could happen. Just like in other areas, if you're a compliance officer and you want certain information from senior management, they may not want to give it to you. They may be hiding something. So you may have to write the board who you report to directly, correct?
So,
And the board might instruct the CEO to tell you or give you the information. Then after that, the CEO is quote unquote vexed with you. Remember that word?
mhm.
And you know how Bahamians go and other people in the world, when we get vexed with you, even though we're wrong, what do we tend to do?
Be mad, treat you different.
Yeah, we be real mean and stinky, and we keep looking for an opportunity to what? Fire the person, hurt the person, keep them from getting a bonus, keep them from getting an increase. All kinds of weird stuff we do because we say the that's because they force the board. You force the board to disclose what they should have disclosed in the first place.
Mhm.
So a similar thing could happen in the case of an administrator and a trustee. Hopefully, it doesn't happen too often, but it could. All right. Number 6, Section 83 of the Trustee Act 1998 allows beneficiaries to blank trustees, trust accounts, and other trust documents, except minutes.
Inspect.
Inspect, yes. If you don't believe it, just go to Section 83 of your Trustee Act and see if you're telling the truth. If you find that it's not Section 83 of the Trustee Act, you can send me an email and say, Mr. Wilkinson, I would like you to know, sir, that it is not Section 83. I checked, and based on my investigations action, actually Section 81. Okay, how's that? And I promise you, I won't hold it against you like some persons in the firm. Like, I'm vexed with you now. Okay, I just say that to encourage you to check it out and see if it's really true. Okay, and if you feel like sending me an email and said, you know what, it's really not Section 83, I would love that. Okay, then I'd go to the section again, check for myself. It makes it all very interesting. So we can do all that exciting stuff rather than getting uptight with each other. Just seek the what? Correct way to do it and move on. No need to get on. All right, number 7. The trust administrator must take special care to ensure that amendments to the trust instrument are done in accordance with any blank reserved within the trust instrument to do so or any other method prescribed.
Express
Fresh
power.
powers.
Yes, express powers. All right, number 8. The amendment to the trust instrument must be blank and blank.
Clear
Clear.
and unequivocal.
Unequivocal.
Absolutely. Has anybody seen that word unequivocal before?
Nope.
No.
First time today.
Sorry?
First time today.
Yeah, see, you can't teach old dogs new tricks then.
Exactly.
It actually means without a doubt, in case you hear it again,
Okay.
or in case you feel like being romantic with somebody who, like a lawyer or something you're dating. And so you can say to them, my love for you, John, is unequivocal.
One.
And John would be quite impressed with that because lawyers like to use big words like unequivocal. And then he will say, you know something, Chris I did not know that you were so substantive in your character. I'm extremely overwhelmed by this new thing that you presented before me. I think you are good marriage material.
So I never trust nothing from a lawyer.
Mr. Wilkinson, what is your day job?
My day job?
Hmm.
That's funny. Uh, well, let me tell you what my profession has been for the last many decades. I don't
Okay.
want to say how many decades because you might guess my age, even though my hair color might seem to be giving me away. But it's not all wrapped up in the hair color, even though it could be.
Yeah, I know people who are in their 20s and they're fully gray.
That's true. So there's hope for me yet.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But I'll just say it's been many decades. I have been I have been a domestic banker and lending manager for many years at Bank of Nova Scotia back in the day. I have been a revenue officer for a couple of years in customs when I had an afro when I was young and skinny. I
70.
have been a financial controller in the banking industry, the transportation industry, and the hotel industry for many years in my past life. I have been a private banker for many years and senior banker in offshore banks, Brazilian banks, and Canadian banks, and Filipino banks, and another Swiss banks for many, many years as a senior banker and compliance officer and senior officer in the bank and all that stuff and so on. So, what is my profession? All of those things, along with uh, I do consultancy for small business. I've been a lecturer for decades and all that stuff. So I've had quite a diversified kind of life.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes when I think about it, that's exactly what I say. Wow, what the hell was I doing? All that crazy stuff. Okay. So yeah, there you go. Because I seem to be involved in all kinds of stuff. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now you can see why I've been around a few times in all kinds of interesting stuff.
Jack of all trades.
You could say that. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Number 9. The trust administrator should not only protect and preserve trust property due to the proposed amendments, but also ensure that the blank and blank of the trustee are not adversely affected.
Legal protection and remuneration.
Yes, the legal protections and the remuneration or fees for the trustees. Two critical things, both of which come to the heart and soul of the trustee. The legal protection so they don't get sued and have to pay a bunch of money and end up in prison even, and certainly their fees, which are crucial to their ongoing practice. And then finally, number 10, not only should the trust administrator ensure that the blank to effectuate the amendments are recognized and executed, but he must also take action in carrying out any and all duties that may assist in the efficient functioning and effective administration of the trust subsequent to any such amendment.
The formality is
Say it again.
uh,
Say it again.
the legal formality is.
Absolutely. The legal formalities. So once again, the legal issue is a major issue as it should be. I mean, we all have to do what we have to do to protect our reputations, and certainly that includes any legalities which can end up causing us money and prison time in many different capacities, not just as a trustee, but also as a CEO, board member, a compliance officer, MLRO, whatever jobs we're doing could easily end up in reputational fines and even imprisonment these days. Okay? So the legal aspect and the compliance aspect of all of these things are absolutely critical. So that's the head and tail of the administrator's job, big time responsibilities. So if you ever accept such a job one day, by that time you'll know exactly what you're accountable for. So when they ask you how much salary you expect to be paid, make sure you do not shortchange yourself because you will be very, very busy with a whole lot of legal and other responsibilities to look after. All right. And are there any questions about any of this stuff before we break?
Well,
No.
I didn't have any, I don't have any direct questions with respect to the text, but just in your experience,
Mhm.
do you find that the trust industry itself is shrinking in the Bahamas, or is it maintaining its own?
There's been a little shrinkage, but it's holding its own.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, uh, the reason the Bahamas is one of those jurisdictions that offer modern trust benefits. And when the smoke is cleared with regards to all the OECD, FATF, and all this other stuff, when we're actually operating completely as we should, which we're pretty much doing now, then I suspect that the trust industry will, quote unquote, continue to stabilize itself. Because remember, there are a whole lot of not so rich and extremely rich people out there who will continue to establish trust for their heirs and their beneficiaries well into the future. They're not going to leave gazillions of dollars in the hands of their children and grandchildren, so to speak, just to do as they see fit. So we can see eventually the expansion of actually trust going forward as the old generation moves on and the new generation continue to establish new and different kinds of trust themselves. Okay, so
But,
yeah,
but
there's been
But
a
do
little.
you, but do you, would you still have that same view even in light of CRS requirements? Because my thing is now, if I have to disclose, my earnings from an investment manager, I am investing in, my trust is investing in stocks and bonds, and I made some dividends here or there.
And
I get some properties and my revenues are going up, and now in the Bahamas, you have all of these new requirements where you would have to disclose that information. But so do you, and this tech used to be an offshore tax haven type thing, and that's kind of almost doing away. So do you have you share the same sentiments with respect to the growth of the industry in light of all of these new regulatory issues?
yeah, again, those kinds of things will result in some shrinkage because those trusts that are set up as primarily to avoid taxes and so on will have to end up paying taxes, and as a result of because of the CRS and all that stuff, and as a result of that, some of them might decide to move back to their home jurisdictions because there's quote unquote no tax haven benefit anymore. Technically, the Bahamas is still perceived by some countries in the European Union as a tax haven, but essentially with all the CRS and FATCA and all the other reporting requirements tax reporting requirements, we are effectively no longer a tax haven. And the sooner we let the world know that that is in fact so. We've been trying, but old scars are not easily removed. So we have to keep tattooing it with the fact that we're not until the tattoo covers the old scars completely, and the world gets the picture that we are no longer a quote unquote tax haven. And so, yeah, we're going to have a couple more people go back home, quote unquote, so to speak, and you'll see some reduction in the trust. But after that happens, those persons who do not want to maintain their trust in their home country for other reasons, for example, we have um, many countries in the world that are just coming in line with what a trust really is. Okay, and so like in China and in Brazil and all these places, and so they'll be looking, where they have certain laws, inheritance laws that work against them. So they'll be looking to open trusts in jurisdictions like the Bahamas so that their assets can be managed from the Bahamas, and especially their liquid assets like investments in cash and that kind of stuff. They'll pay taxes, but their assets will not be under the direct control of their government. And once they can prove they paid the taxes on their income, then the governments can't force them to bring it back to the jurisdiction. So we'll see an increase in those kinds of things while we see a decrease in those trusts that were established primarily to take advantage of what we used to call a tax haven status. So there will be some losses on one end and there'll be gains on the other end. And then those that have always been standing will stay for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, but it's an excellent question because it has come up in many of the major jurisdictions, like the UK, especially, where they've been asking themselves the same thing. But they're optimistic as well because remember, the UK is now no longer part of the European Union, which is another thing. So, in essence, their trusts in the UK jurisdiction are like trusts in the Bahamas. The UK is now an offshore trustee. You follow? They still have many European trustees, which many of them will keep, and others will go back because it won't be beneficial for them to stay in the UK, in the Bahamas, and the Caribbean for certain tax provisions. But there are other benefits in terms of having their assets managed outside of their home country. Same reason why you get when you open two accounts. You don't put all of your money in one bank account because if something happens, you'll be stuck. And so a lot of settlers, a lot of wealthy people, and not so wealthy people will be continuing to open up trusts in offshore jurisdictions because do not want to have all the eggs in one basket. So they may have one trustee in the Bahamas or this jurisdiction, or they may have, remember, you can have several trustees. They may have one trust in the Bahamas, one in Cayman, one in the UK. All might be the same settlor with assets of a different kind. If the property is in the UK, for example, they might well establish a trust for the management of the property in the UK because property is immovable. You can't move it. But as far as the assets and investments are concerned, they might establish a trust in the Bahamas because they want the assets to be managed outside of the Bahamas and not under the direct control of their governments and so on. And even if they try to fight with them, it won't be easy for their governments to get their hands on it, even though they can prove that they've paid the taxes. And so as a result of that, yeah, it'll continue to hold its own. All right. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? It doesn't have to be related to the administrator, who's probably working this weekend anyway, trying to get things together for Monday. All right, fantastic. I hope the Institute will allow me to continue with you guys next week. If that does not happen for some godforsaken reason, let me just say that you guys have been absolutely amazing. I hope I've left some interesting things with you to contemplate as you further your careers. You guys are essentially the future, so you're the ones who will be messing with this stuff going forward. And if you have any questions or concerns that you might want to raise along the way, feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to respond, notwithstanding. If for some reason I don't get to pick it up next week with you guys, I will see you in Trust Administration 2, I trust, which you must do in order to round out and roll out this experience. All right, so either way, you will run into me by hook or by crook. And until then, you guys be safe, take care, and good luck with your examination.
Mr. Wilkinson, I
Mhm.
have one more question. Sorry, is class resuming at 9 next week, or are we continuing with 12 or?
I know, so good question. Excellent question. Classes will resume at 9 o'clock next week. The 12
Okay.
o'clock thing was just something I had to do because of the blah, blah, blah. So
Okay.
yes, you have classes as usual at 9 o'clock next week. If you want to double check that, feel free to send an email to Ms. Dean and she'll confirm that. But yeah, it's essentially the original time at 9 o'clock next week. Great question.
Oh, sorry. Did you find out how the exam was going to be laid out?
Yeah, the examination, as I understand it, will be short answer questions mostly and some true and false questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
All right, mostly short answers and some true and false questions. So you basically just need to be familiar with the core information, know what things are, know what they mean, know the basic duties of the trust administrator, the trustee, retirement, removal issues, what constitutes a trust, and all this kind of stuff, who the participants in the trust, and what their responsibilities are. The trust asks the whole nine. Yeah, once you basically know what they are, what their responsibilities are, and so on, you should be fine. Okay.
So,
Remember, do not wait until the last minute to start studying. You will
no,
only make
sir.
yourself miserable
Yes, sir.
and the world around you. Let's not, let's not forget that. And for you who are married, especially your spouse, because he's going to get it first or she. All right. So take care and good luck, and I'll see you guys one way or the other.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Take care and be safe.
All right.
Take care. Bye bye.
Take care.